then why is it that a person that is an intruder would be sitting down in the yard? Does it make sense to you? No, it doesn't. So how could Ncube have grown his dreadlocks in 3 minutes? If they couldn't get the information in 2020, how was Pinky able to get it in 2024? It's because it was already there. And the judge's interpretation of Angazi Luto is, I wasn't there. Jarni.
And I'm bad like the Barbie. I'm a dog, but I still wanna party. Pink felt like I'm ready to bend. I'm a 10, so I pull a next 10. Like Daddy.
Hello and welcome to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Ntanzi, also known as Gwazi Bear on all social media platforms. Do subscribe, be a part of this family, and if you are a returning subscriber, welcome back, darling. Now, as you know, every week I bring you updates in the Senzo Meyiwa trial, so I'm here to do exactly that. But before we get started, we got a few rules in this house. Firstly, please like this video and make sure that you comment down below with your opinion and your thoughts of this week's proceedings. This will help my video to get recommended to more users, therefore growing this family. And the third thing, please do not skip ads. That is how I make money on YouTube. Please watch the ads in full and make sure that you watch the video in full as well. And the last one, being very optional, do super thanks if you can. So let's get right into this video. Monday, the 2nd of December, Advocate Ntanzi, defense for accused number 3, continued with his cross-examination of Brigadier Gininda, the lead investigating officer in this case. And as he continued with his cross-examination, one of the questions that came up is the issue of the first intruder, being the gentleman with the dreadlocks. Ntanzi asked Gininda what was the description that was given by all the witnesses with regards to the person who carried the gun. Now, in his explanation, Gininda does explain that throughout all this, the witness's statement, it is consistent that this person had dreadlocks. Some of the other descriptions he mentions are the big eyes, as well as some of the people in the house saying that he had a gold tooth, or some of the witnesses saying that he had a gold tooth. And then it was the issue of the complexion, which most of them said he was dark brown and shiny in complexion. And then another thing is the length of the dreads, which ended about neck length, as well as the jacket that he was wearing, where the description was either khaki or light brown or beige when they described the jacket that this intruder was wearing. Another one of the descriptions is the fact that in Steenkamp's statement, it was mentioned to her this particular jacket had a woolen collar, which is not consistent with the jacket that is shown on accused number 3's photos. Now, another thing that was new information on Monday during this cross-examination is Gininda mentioning a statement by a Madingwane. Now, it's the first time we've heard this name in court, where Gininda says that this particular witness, Madingwane, who hasn't been called to the stand yet, does explain that he did see someone outside the Khumalo residence wearing a hat, which is now going in line with the fact that they say that one of the intruders was indeed wearing a hat when they entered the house, and the hat was left at the scene after they had fled. A very funny thing that happened on Monday is Ntanzi showing Brigadier Gininda photos of accused number 3 and the length of his dreadlocks. So basically, he shows Gininda photo number 12. And he does say that the dreadlocks on that particular photo are short. And then Ntanzi shows him another picture, which is photo number 17, and in this photo the length of the dreadlocks is much longer than the first picture. So Gininda says that well, he doesn't know when these pictures were taken and how far apart they were taken, so he does see that the length in the second picture is much longer than the length in the first picture. Then Ntanzi reads the record on the photos, which indicates the times in which these photos were taken, and it is clear that both of these photos were taken on the same day, about 3 minutes apart. So how could Ncube have grown his dreadlocks in 3 minutes? The issue of the complexion of the alleged intruder was mentioned last week. Gininda had said that no, the witnesses in the house were confused and that they did change their statements at later stages. However, this week he came with a completely different tune. It's as if over the weekend they decided, no, we're gonna say Ncube was dark. And he then says that Ncube is dark in his pictures. Now he goes as far as saying, you know, in this picture, we don't know what time of day it is, but also the lighting does affect the picture. Now guys, I have a problem with the statement by Gininda because lighting plays a big role in the appearance of someone's picture. Firstly, if you are facing the lights, as I am at the moment, you can clearly see my complexion and it reflects very clearly on the screen. However, if I were to turn my phone and have the lights facing behind me, I would appear darker in pictures, but that doesn't change the complexion of the person when you see them in real life. Photos, yes, you may appear darker, but when you see a person inside a house in a lit room, you will clearly see their complexion. So this explanation to me did not make sense. I will even try to demonstrate, because I'm one person that wants to demonstrate in order for people to see. I will try and demonstrate and put a picture. I'll take a picture of myself facing the ring lights, and in the same position I'll take a picture of me facing the opposite side, and you will clearly see that the lighting will affect my complexion in the picture. But if you're with me right now in this room, it will not change my complexion. The exercise that Advocate Ntanzi went on is the exercise of trying to identify what Gininda was saying in his statement, where he says that accused number 3 is the suspect that they're looking for because of the description of the big eyes, the dreadlocks, and the gold tooth. So Ntanzi then asked Brigadier Gininda to actually show us the photos in which he was referring to, where he sees accused number 3 with short dreads, big eyes, dreadlocks, and the dark shiny complexion, as well as this gold tooth. And this exercise seemed to be very, very difficult for Gininda, because in one of the photos, particularly the one where he says that's where he says he sees the gold tooth on accused number 3, that picture is not accused number 3, first of all. And then when it's put to him that that picture isn't accused number 3, he then says the angle might be a bit difficult or tricky to see, but according to him, that is definitely accused number 3. Now, the funny thing about this particular gold tooth issue is the fact that that's the only picture where Gininda can see a gold tooth. So you're telling me out of 3,686 photos of Mncube, or 6,886 pictures of Mncube that were downloaded from his phone, that is the only picture where he has a gold tooth? There is a particular picture that they focus on, and it's photo 46, where Gininda says you can see that these photos were taken on the same day, but the outfit that accused number 3 was wearing is different. Now, this is in line with what Zungu had said. This is just to prove that Zungu had been given access to these pictures to come to court and tell us the story that he told us, because Zungu at some point said that he went to the hostel, and at some point some of the people changed at the hostel, changed outfits. But this is now not corroborating with the times on the pictures, because the first picture where accused number 3 is wearing a different outfit was said to be shot in the morning before he even left Johannesburg, and the other pictures where he's obviously wearing that khaki jacket, as explained by the witnesses, is now later on in the day when he had already left Johannesburg. And from his cell phone evidence, we can see that there isn't a point where he left Johannesburg, went to Vosloorus, and went back to Johannesburg to indicate the changing that Zungu once commented on. But they were just trying to make it link so that they could say, oh yeah, in this picture he was wearing a different outfit, but it's on the same day. In this picture he's wearing a different outfit. But if you look at the times of the photos, that's where the catch is at. Now, another issue that Ntanzi touches on is the fact that Gininda had already said that accused number 3 was found with pictures showing or depicting the firearm that was used in Senzo Meyiwa's killing. Now, this became an issue because how can you be sure that it is the exact same firearm? And that debate came up, and the judge was asking questions with regards to that. Gininda was unable to identify certain things that could say for certain that that gun was the same gun that killed Senzo, because how many 9mm guns are there? And the interesting thing about this point is the fact that Gininda also himself says that no, this is a 9mm pistol, but then he says the gun that killed Senzo had a specialized features or whatever the case might be, or had a different name. So how is it that you're saying that this is the same gun that killed Senzo when you're not sure? Like, what features can you see in the photo that identify this gun as the gun that killed Senzo? Nesi then says that he puts it to Gininda that he misled the magistrate when he gave this information, because there's no way he could tell that that was the exact same gun. Similar, yes, but it's not the exact same gun, and he misled that magistrate when he did that application. Now, an issue that I once spoke about in one of my previous videos is the issue of Mnube's Section 205s, where Gininda says that the first time he had sight or knew about these Section 205s was when Pinky Vithellingham came to testify about those Section 205s. But now I've been consistently saying that it's not possible that Gininda didn't have access to these Section 205s. Reason being, Pinky explained the process of putting those Section 205s into the system and how the police can actually access those systems via TSU on the front end of Vodacom systems. Pinky does explain that when they receive a request for Section 205, they then upload the request onto the system, and they, as Vodacom, have given front-end access to the Vodacom system, which means that the police or certain units in the police, which is named as TSU, has access to this particular database at all times, forever, basically, because as long as Pinky puts it onto the system, it will be there. Now, the funny thing is that Gininda says no, they only had information for a certain date. Now, where Mnisi gets tricky with the questioning, he says, okay, I get that you only had certain dates, but then when you realize that it doesn't cover the dates that you were looking for, what did you do? And Gininda says, well, we went back to Vodacom and asked them for the particular date that we were looking for, and they said because 3 years had passed, then they couldn't get the information. Now, my question is, if they couldn't get the information in 2020, how was Pinky able to get it in 2024? It's because it was already there. Mnisi continues with his cross-examination, and one of the issues that comes up is the picture that was supposedly taken in Georgico Hostel, where he says, this is accused number 3, this is a photo that was taken at this time, and he says he was at Georgico Hostel, and Gininda then does say, yeah, he might have been there at that time, but later on he was in Vosloorus according to the witnesses. Now, my question is, you're telling us that Mnube was smart enough to give his phone to someone else to take it to Johannesburg so that he can commit a crime, but he wasn't smart enough not to take his phone to Vosloorus on the day of the incident so that he's not there at all according to his phone. Like, please make it make sense, because if Mnube was that smart, he wouldn't have taken his phone to Vosloorus on the day. He wouldn't have taken the phone to Vosloorus on the day. So now you're telling us that he was stupid enough to go to Vosloorus, and he knew that his phone would be picked up in Vosloorus, but then when he went to go commit the murder, he then gave his phone to someone else for him to take it to Johannesburg so that it would appear that he's in Johannesburg whilst he's in Vosloorus. Please make it make sense. And how is it that it's right and it's valid that Mnube had his phone when the location of the phone was in Vosloorus, but now when the location of the phone is in Johannesburg, then all of a sudden you separate the user from the phone? Please. Now, before Mnisi concluded the cross-examination on Monday, then tells Gininda that accused number 3 does know accused number 4 and 5. However, he did not know accused number 1 and 2 until their appearance in court on the 27th of October in 2020. Those were the proceedings on Monday. Now, on Tuesday, Mnisi indicated that he had completed his cross-examination, and there was an issue with regards to the Section 205s, where Baloyi then quoted the record where Pinky says the Section 205s were requested for the period of 23 October right through to January of 2015. Now, this information, Baloyi does put it on record that it only became available through Pinky before she came to testify. So the assertion by Mnisi to say that these records were available to the defense before the case started is incorrect. Mnisi refused to apologize to Gininda on this point. He was basing this on the fact that investigations were not done properly, because if he says that he realized that he didn't have the information of 26 October way back in 2020 and approached Vodacom should have been able to provide the same details that Pinky was able to provide this year. Tuesday, before Ngumalo commenced with his cross-examination, there was an issue that was raised by the judge, and it is with regards to the broadcasting of these proceedings. Now, I find this absolutely ridiculous. It's been almost 2 years of us watching these proceedings. And suddenly, now that we're getting to the crux of the matter, there is a complaint from the court's manager saying that the SABC are using the electricity of the court, that they should be bringing their own generator or something to that effect. And I'm just like, we've been at this for 2 years, and after 2 years now you're noticing that the SABC should be using their own generators to be able to broadcast. Come on. You don't want the public to see these proceedings, and that's on period. When Nxumalo commenced his cross-examination, he hit also on accused number 2, which I love for the defense because this teamwork is doing very good. Now Nxumalo touches on the issue of Ntanzi's arrest and how on the 17th of June he was taken to the boardroom. Now the interesting question that Nxumalo asked is with regards to the 18th. He says that on the 18th, Ntanzi was then booked out of the police station. For which case was he booked out for? This was an interesting question for me because you told us that Ntanzi was arrested on a Nongoma case. You're booking him out of the boardroom on Wednesday to go and confirm an alibi for Senzo Meyiwa's case, but you're booking him out for another case. And Gininda's response was that they booked him out for other investigations on other cases. But where were those investigations done? Because according to AVL, they went straight from the police station to the mines when Ntanzi was working. So what other investigations were they doing at the mines? Another major thing that Nxumalo touched on Tuesday was the issue of the warning statements, where Gininda did bring in different types of warning statements that he says are being used at different police stations. And basically they touched on the issue of which warning statements should be used and all of that. Another question that Nxumalo touches on is the issue of the people that were on the lookout. Now, as we know from Ntanzi's confession, as well as Muzi's confession, there were people that were on the lookout outside of the Khumalo house, but inside the yard. Now, Nxumalo questions, is there any witness that says that they saw someone in the yard of the Khumalos? Now Gininda goes back and forth and he says, no, Makaleni says he saw 2 gentlemen at the danger box and all of that. And Nxumalo's like, no, I'm referring to inside the yard. So Gininda asks that they get back to that. And after the adjournments, they do get back to that. And we get another new name. Monday, it was Madingwane. And today we get a new witness by the name of Bonginkosi Nkabinde. Now, Gininda had originally said it was the Ngashes that said that they saw someone in the yard, but when he went back to the statements, there was no statement that confirms such. Nxumalo even goes as far as, I've looked at 3 statements from the Ngashes and none of them speak about seeing a person in the yard. Then Gininda refers to a statement of Ubonginkosi Nkabinde. Now the interesting thing about this particular statement is that he says he saw 2 gentlemen in the yard at the Khumalos. But now let's listen to what these 2 gentlemen were doing. He says one of them was on his phone and the other one was sitting on the floor. So if you remember the testimony of Umtogo and Utumelo, there was a point where Umtogo and Utumelo went outside the Khumalo household for a smoke. Now, my understanding of this person, when they say they saw a person on the phone and one person sitting down, tell me, why is it that a person that is an intruder would be sitting down in the yard? Does it make sense to you? No, it doesn't. Now I am more convinced than ever that most of the witnesses that say they saw 2 or 3 people are referring to the people that were already in the house, namely Tumelo, Togo, or even Longwe at that point. Malo also touches on the issue of Mapisa being a person that ran back in the house. He says, is there a witness or a statement that says that they saw another person running into the Khumalo house? And there is no such statement. Malo was really hitting on the right places. I don't know which Nxumalo is this one, but damn, I loved his cross-examination because he also touches on the issue of the planning. These people are said to have conspired to kill Senzo. So Nxumalo's question is there a witness that can say they heard the conversation of the planning? And there isn't. All Gininda can refer to is the fact that Kwabini places them at the hostel, Zungu places them at the hostel, but did anyone hear the planning? And the answer is no. Something else that Nxumalo touches on is the issue of Constable Zungu, our main character in this case, where he says that Zungu came to testify before the court and he told us that he met you on several times and he has already said that he told you that he knows nothing about the killing of Senzo Meyiwa. Nxumalo also refers to the record and it clearly says angazi lutho, I don't know anything. Now the funny thing about this particular part in cross-examination is where the judge butts in, and the judge's interpretation of angazi lutho is I wasn't there. Njani continues to read the record of Zungu's testimony, where he talks about the meeting that he had with Brigadier Tony as well as Gininda. And the funny thing is, he's still mentioning the 5 accused in the meeting with Gininda, but Gininda had told the court that the only time that the names of accused number 3, 4, and 5 came into play was when Ntanzi made his confession. So the proceedings on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, the 4th of December, Baloyi then handed up the warning statements that Gininda had brought in the court, and he gave them exhibit numbers. Malo then puts it to Gininda that Zungu has been consistent in saying that akazi lutho, or he doesn't know anything when it comes to this particular case. Now, Numalo also touches on the issue that Advocate Mnisi touched on with regards to the Section 205s, where he says, when you notice that the Section 205s that were available in the Cleveland case didn't cover the date that you were dealing with, what did you do? Then Gininda says that, well, they tried to engage the networks being Vodacom, and he says that they said that the time has lapsed. Now, Numala's next question was, if the window period has lapsed, how did Vodacom be able to get the documents now? And he says, well, they are the service provider. They probably have archives. And I'm like, Gininda. If they told you they couldn't do it in 2020, they shouldn't have been able to do it in 2024. And that's on period. Now, Numalo goes into the issue of photo number 7. Now, this photo, if you remember, Zungu was led by Baloyi, where he says that in this particular photo, there's a gentleman wearing a cap, and he identified that gentleman as being accused number 2. Now, when Numalo cross-examined Zungu last year in September, my apologies, he then told Zungu that this particular person in this picture is not accused number 2. It's not accused number 2. It is in fact accused number 4. And Zungu's response to this was, well, if it's not accused number 4, then I'm glad he admits that he was there. But Zungu, you know these people. They're your homeboys. How are you confusing accused number 2 with accused number 4 if you were there? Now, when this question is posed to Gininda, he says that Zungu was not shown the exhibit that is before the court. He was shown an album which has an A number. Now, my thing is, my guy, it only has an exhibit number because it's been submitted in court. But bottom line, it's the exact same documents that you were using in your docket for investigation. So that photo having an A number and now having an exhibit number is exactly the same thing. It's still the same photo. Kuhluke E number because this is before the court and your docket wasn't. The issue that Numalo kept touching on that made Baloyi very uncomfortable is the issue of the indictment, and how then the indictment doesn't say that Kelly Khumalo is the mastermind, neither does the indictment mention Kelly Khumalo as the trigger point. However, Kelly Khumalo is the complainant because it said that her phone was stolen. So now Numalo was trying to get an understanding, is Kelly Khumalo the mastermind, or is she a complainant in this particular case? That question did not sit well with Baloyi. He just kept objecting and objecting and objecting. The issue that Numalo touched on is the issue of DNA, where he says that all of the accused were excluded from the DNA. And now Gininda says, well, you know, Mapisa, there were 4 regions that he was picked up, and that is in line with the fact that when Ntanzi ran out of the Khumalo household, he ran in. Now, guys, I have a video that is specially dedicated to DNA that I posted before this video, so go and check it out and see how this makes 0 sense. Our comment that was made by the judge on this day with regards to DNA, he says, well, DNA is like fingerprints. With fingerprints, you need 7, and even if you get 5, then you can't convict a person on that. And Numalo says, yeah, that's the same in this case. And I was like, ooh, no conviction, hello. And then touches on the issue of the bank statements and the payments that were received. And he says, well, you went to the banks specifically to see if they were payments, right? Gininda does concede to this, and then he says, were there any suspicious transactions on my client's bank statement? And he says no, but the payments were made in cash. According to Ntanzi, he received a 15,000 and then received a 30,000 from accused number 5. And then he says, is there evidence that says that my client was paid? And the answer is no, but Kwabini told me that Was he paid or not? Is there evidence that he was paid? Because what you're telling me now is hearsay, Gininda. Like, honestly, anything Gwabini and the rest of the people are saying is hearsay, and also these statements are not before the court. They have not been handed up. They have not been questioned. The person has not come to testify. I don't know why Gininda keeps referring to these statements. Numalo does pick up on this thing of Gininda wanting to read the statement of Gwabini into the record and says, no, you cannot be referring to statements of people who have not testified. And Nisi as well does object and says that what Gininda is doing is very fallacious. It's a fallacy. Nisi and his big words, he says it is fallacious because the question is simple. Is there evidence of payment? But Gininda is now going into the statements of people that doesn't talk about the actual payment of the people that were involved or alleged to be involved in this case. One thing about lies, they will eventually catch up to you, because when Numalo touches on the issue of Colonel Stain, who talks about the Section 205s and the numbers that he reads and the numbers that he received from Gininda, Colonel Stain in his evidence says he has access to the police database. Now remember what I told you about TSU having access to Vodacom's front-end system? Stain in his evidence says he had that access. So if Stain had that access, Stain would have the same information that Vodacom had with regards to accused number 3's what? Section 205s. Now I'll tell you why this is funny, guys. Because when Stain gave his testimony, remember how he mentioned that he received numbers from Gininda. Now I'll tell you why this is a problem, because I feel that Stain came to testify on information that was already cooked. Now, Stain was given numbers by Gininda. So he was given a list of numbers with names on the side to say this particular number belongs to this particular person. And he even went as far as saying that number that ends in 1239, if I remember correctly, was a number associated with accused number 5. This was information he was given by Gininda. But we later found that that number belonged to Lungisani Ndwandwe. So basically, Stain came to testify on cooked evidence, but he also contributed to the cooking because he had access to Mumbai Section 205. My goodness, this is all allegedly. When Numalo asked Gininda if he had sight of the information that Stain said, that Stain had, he says that he's not an expert, so he didn't look at the information. Now, my question on Wednesday was, how the hell are you the lead investigating officer, and when a person or an expert gives a report on something that you're investigating, you don't even go through it with the expert to have an understanding of what they found? That was my question on Wednesday. And Gininda basically says he's not an expert, he can't question Stain's work, he was just given that work and he took what Stain said and brought it in. Like, Jarni, those were the proceedings on Wednesday. And on Thursday, funny thing, Gininda corrects the very same thing that I was concerned about the previous day, to say, how can Stain give you information and not brief you? How can you not be acquainted to the information that you have in your docket or the findings that you have in your docket? So on Thursday, during cross-examination, it comes to light that he was briefed after having denied it the day before, saying he's not an expert, so he can't talk on Stain's evidence. Gininda, who's fooling who? On Thursday, Numalo touches on the issue of the ballistic report on the Cleveland case with regards to this particular gun that is said to have been linked to Senzo Meyiwa's killing. And Numalo does read that there were cases in which were sent to the IBIS to be able to compare the gun against. There were results, obviously, for these tests that were conducted. Now, many people have been asking, why is it that Masondo was telling accused number 3 that his gun was not involved? What was Masondo doing with Senzo Meyiwa's case in 2015? Masondo wasn't fidgeting with Senzo Meyiwa's case. What had happened was, when the gun was found, it had to be tested against cases or previous cases to be able to see if it wasn't involved in any of the previous cases. Now, logic will say to you as a person, logic Gininda, will say, if this gun was said to be tested against all previous cases, Senzo Meyiwa's case would be a part of those cases because it was in 2014. And indeed, that was the point. There was some other cases, I will quote about 3 of them. There were about 16 cases that this particular gun of accused number 3 was tested against and a report was provided. One of them being this Senzo Meyiwa case 636 of 10 of 2014. There was a Tsakani case 205 of 12 of 2014. There was a Phosphorus case 176 of 9 of 2014, and several others. Now, there's a statement that Ngumalo read into the record by Mahaliho, who says that she was near the Khumalo residence on the day of the incident, and the interesting thing about her particular statement is that now she says that she saw a gentleman running from the Khumalo house whilst other people were running towards the Khumalo house. Now this is interesting because all the evidence we've heard so far is that only 2 people were seen on the street running down to the park. Now this statement says that there was a lot of movement on the street by the Khumalo house. This statement says there was a lot of movement on the streets on the night of the incident, and she says that she was able to identify the person that was running from the scene. Now, she says that she spoke to a police officer as early as August in 2018. Now, the surprising thing about this particular police officer that she mentions is that she says it's Mohane. Now, my issue is, how was Mohane already involved before Brigadier Gininda came into the picture? Because according to Gininda, he was appointed in 2018, in November. But Mohane was already taking statements from people, or Mohane was already questioning witnesses in this very same case. Crazy business. Ngumalo also touches on the issue of the linkages that Brigadier Gininda keeps referring to, saying that accused number 3 has links. Gininda, you cannot keep saying that there are links between accused number 3 and Kelly Khumalo when you cannot tell us what those links are. Because till today, we don't know what those links are. When he's asked, is the link the photo of the money that you see? And he says no, but he doesn't know the source of that particular picture in any case. Ngumalo then puts the version of accused number 4 and also refers back to this particular picture where Zungu had identified accused number 4 as accused number 2, and the argument was that no, Zungu later corrected his statement. But I disagree. Zungu had said that is accused number 2, and the only time that anything different came along was when Ngumalo was cross-examining him, telling him that Mapisa says that is him. And he even says, oh, then if he also agrees that he was there, then that's it. But you said it was Ntanzi, my guy. You said it was Ntanzi. So if you know these people so well from the homelands, how is it that you're confusing them? Ngumalo, when completing his version of accused number 4, then does say there's nothing that places him in the incident. Gininda still refers to the DNA, the 4 regions that were said to have been found, and he says that he does know accused number 5 and he does know accused number 3, and he also knew accused number 1, but Ntanzi he did not know until they met where? In court on the 27th of October in 2020. Those were the proceedings on Thursday, and on Friday, the 6th of December, Mshololo commenced with her cross-examination of Brigadier Gininda. One thing Mshololo will do is lay down the ground rules. She says, Gininda, I'm here to ask questions, you're here to answer. It's not vice versa. 2, I will ask you to answer my questions briefly so that you don't confuse me. 3, if I need an explanation, I will ask you to explain. Don't just explain. Then goes on to asking Brigadier Gininda about his career, and one thing that had not come up in his career in the trial within a trial is the issue of the taxi violence, which I've been consistently updating you guys about, to say that Gininda was part of the taxi violence unit, and he does say that he was the head of this particular unit. This information was not given to us in the trial within a trial. Mshololo then touches on the issue of a statement by Yolanda Moeng, who is said to be the director of the car rental company that accused number 5 once used in 2016. Now, when Mshololo asks who requested a statement from this lady, Gininda says it's himself, and then he starts explaining the process, and Mshololo says, just stop there. I asked you who requested the statements, and that was it. I didn't ask for you to explain. Another issue that Mshololo touches on is the issue of the infringement notices that were said to be of accused number 5. Now, accused number 5 did indeed rent a car from this particular company, but this rental was in 2016, and it was for a white Polo that they had at the time. This lady does have the contract of this hiring of the car. She has a copy of his cards, his driver's license, etc., etc. Now, when Gininda asked this lady to look into any rentals of 2014, Gininda says this lady was unable to give her this information because the company was liquidated. Now, if the company was liquidated, what does that have to do with finding information or documentation of a rental in 2014 if they were able to find it for 2016? That's just my question. Now, when Mshololo goes into the infringement notices, she goes into one particular infringement where she says, can you see that there is an infringement notice for this particular company on a vehicle that they had at the time? And Gininda says yes. And Mshololo says, but you don't know who the driver is because in the infringement notice, there isn't an infringer. And Gininda says, yes, there isn't an infringer, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't Ntuli. So now, because Ntuli hired the car in 2016, and there's a date for 2014, you're just going to assume that that date was Ntuli. It's like saying, I've been to a doctor in Pretoria. I once went to a doctor in Pretoria. And because I once went to that doctor in Pretoria, if that doctor was visited in 2020, then I could have been the one that visited, even if it wasn't me. Like, Gininda, please make it make sense. Because just because he hired a car from that company in 2016, it doesn't mean that a car rental in 2014 or a ticket that was in 2014, it would be accused number 5 driving. Like, how? Mshololo continues on her cross-examination, and one of the questions that came up is with regards to Zungu's source, or Zungu being the source of the information in this case. Now she says, Zungu, you already know that he met with Makubo and Lishabane and the works. And Gininda says yes. Mshololo then reads the statement of Uzungu, or the testimony of Uzungu, where he says that he met with Lishabane and Makubo, and he told Makubo what he knew about this particular case, and Makubo basically dismissed him. And the reason why Makubo dismissed him is because he had arrested accused number 5. Now, my understanding of this situation is that when Zungu spoke about the Senzo Meyiwa incident, he says, I know the people that were responsible for Senzo's death because I was with 2 of them in Tembisa on so-and-so date. When Makubo asked, how were you with this person? Because I arrested this person. That's how Makubo dismissed Zungu's information. And Makubo basically said to him, this is nonsense, bring your source. And Zungu at the time does not tell Makubo that his father is the source. However, fast forward to a couple of months down the line, he then tells Gininda that the father is the source. And the funny thing about this is the fact that when Zungu testified in the court, his understanding of his father's involvement was that his father was there to confirm that he knows the 5 accused, meaning that the names of Mube, Nkani, and Mapisa were already known to the police at that time, yet Gininda say they came through Ntanzi. It's still going to be an interesting cross-examination by Mshololo. She did request that the proceedings be stopped early on Friday as she was struggling to find some of her notes. And the issue that we might have next week is the fact that Jonas is unavailable to interpret, and clearly Mshololo doesn't want Mr. Ngobo to interpret for the accused. She says that accused number 5 has complained about the interpretation of Mr. Ngobo. So it is said that the court will adjourn until Monday, pending arrangements about a new interpreter. Those were the proceedings for the week. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed the proceedings, and I look forward to next week because it is the last week of the proceedings for the year. Enjoy your weekend. Bye.